an insurance adjuster disappeared while inspecting property damage after a severe storm. The water currents of a nearby river provided some answers, and the forensic evidence on a motorcycle part and bank envelope explained the motive. In the summer of 2004, there were 4 hurricanes in Florida within 6 weeks, causing more than $1 billion worth of damage. Thousands were left homeless.
A lot of people had a lot of hurricane damage. I mean, for months and months and months after the storms hit, you could see blue tarps on roofs throughout the state of Florida.
All across the state, insurance companies dispatched their adjusters to assess the damage claims. One of them was 25-year-old Katie Freshley. It was her first job after graduating from college.
We got hit with the first, and then the second, and then the third, and then the fourth hurricane in such a short time. They were absolutely overwhelmed.
One Friday night after a grueling week of work, Katie was supposed to meet a group of friends at a local restaurant. But she never showed up. In fact, none of her family and friends heard from her all weekend.
My wife just kept calling Kate periodically and saying she can't get hold of her, and she just doesn't understand where she could be.
She had had a 4-year relationship with a guy and had broken up with him and was living independently, and for the first time in her life was making her own decisions.
Katie's best friend, Amy, had a key to Katie's apartment and let herself inside. Everything was in perfect order, although the cat hadn't been fed. And Katie wasn't there.
She knew something was really wrong, and so she called and she said, "I don't want to alarm you, but I'm worried about Katie. I don't know where she is and I can't find her."
Police put out a bulletin for Katie's car, a maroon-colored Chevy Impala. Katie's employer said her last appointment on Friday afternoon was to check on an insurance claim of a leaking roof at a home in Tampa's Sulphur Springs section.
I knew the kind of neighborhood it was. It was an extremely bad neighborhood.
Katie, for some reason, was having trouble finding it, and Amy was back at the office on, I think, MapQuest, and was directing Katie to the property.
According to Katie's co-worker, she finally found the property.
Someone walks up, she goes, "Oh, I think I found it. Someone's walking up to the car. I'll talk to you later."
And that's the last anyone talked to her.
Katie's parents drove out to the home at 1503 Mulberry Street and spoke to the occupants, Jason Funk and Pamela Hintz, a young couple who had just moved into the rental property 3 days earlier.
We moved in, and now we have strangers knocking on our door asking, "Hey, have you seen Katrina Freshley here?" And then people asking, "Well, have you seen, an insurance car?"
Jason and Pamela told the Freshleys they didn't see Katie on Friday because they weren't there. And there was something else. They said there was no leak in the roof that they knew of, and that the landlord said nothing to them about an insurance adjuster coming by to look at it. Just a mile away, in the parking lot of a local bar, Katie's parents found her abandoned car and called police. It was unlocked, with Katie's keys still inside.
My first thought was she was in the trunk.
You wanted him to open it, but you didn't want him to open it. You just didn't.
When they opened that trunk, it was dead silence.
In the locked trunk of Katie Freshley's car, investigators feared that they'd find her body. But they did not. The only thing there was Katie's purse. Her money and credit cards were missing.
You were relieved because she wasn't there. But she wasn't there, so you were still looking, and you didn't know where to look.
Forensic scientists searched for evidence inside the car. They didn't find any blood or fingerprints, but they did find skin cells on the steering wheel.
Swabbings from the steering wheel of Katie's car were submitted to the laboratory, and DNA testing was performed on these samples. We found a mixture of DNA of at least 2 contributors.
One was Katie Freshley's. The other DNA profile was presumably the killer's. Other than an empty bank envelope inside the car, investigators found nothing else.
It was obvious whatever happened to Katie didn't happen inside of that car.
Police interviewed residents and workers in the area and found a janitor who said a man left the car in the parking lot the day before.
Witness had seen a white male, approximately 6'2", 6'3", walking away from the car.
He had driven the car up and had gotten out of the car and had started walking away and had just dropped the keys in the car and left it unlocked.
Investigators searched the area between Katie's last scheduled appointment and where her car was discovered, roughly a mile away. On a hunch, Detective Masucci searched the shores of the Hillsborough River and eventually got a break.
And as I was scanning the water with my flashlight, I caught a glimpse of white, and I went back to it, and it took me several minutes to recognize what it was, but eventually it appeared to me to be a bra. I could see a little bit of a bra strap. I realized that we were beyond red flags, that we had something potentially tragic here.
Soon, everyone's worst fears were confirmed. It was Katie Freshley.
I just fell down. I remember just like somebody punched me in the stomach. I just doubled up and just fell down to the ground, and I just couldn't believe it.
She had been in the water for approximately 30 hours. It appeared she had also been sexually assaulted.
This doesn't happen to people like us. This happens to other people. We read about it in the papers. We see it on TV, but this doesn't happen to us.
The autopsy revealed blunt force injuries to the back of Katie's head.
It was very apparent that this was not a drowning, but in fact, she was probably murdered and then put into the water. There certainly remains a possibility that she might have been alive when she was put in the water. I don't know that that can be ruled out.
But the medical examiner found distinct marks on Katie's skull, marks known as pattern injuries.
There was a mark left behind by the weapon that was very characteristic. It was a circular mark that was 1.2 centimeters, is I think how big it was.
The medical examiner told investigators that the wounds might be matched to the murder weapon if it could be found.
If you detect a pattern injury and then you can in fact find the weapon, that's a huge help to the investigation.
A rape test kit was inconclusive. Investigators' next task was to find out how far Katie's body traveled in the Hillsborough River before police found her. This could potentially identify the crime scene. It's a relatively simple formula. From the length of time a body is in the water, you can figure out the distance the body traveled if you know the speed of the currents. Investigators got a huge break when they learned there was a dam a few miles upstream. When it opens, it significantly increases the water current.
In the 28-hour period between the time we believe Katie was put into the river to the time I found her, the dams had been closed off.
That meant that Katie's body entered the river pretty much where she was found. From the moment Katie Freshley's body was found in the Hillsborough River, police considered the home at 1503 East Mulberry Street as a possible crime scene. It was just 100 feet from where Katie's body was discovered. The young couple living there were shocked by what happened. They insisted they weren't home on the Friday afternoon the murder took place.
These people are oblivious to what could have potentially happened at their house.
You know, I'm kind of drawing a blank on my emotional state at that time, but no, I know I wasn't nearly as anxious as my girlfriend is, you know. I'm more of a realist person. It's just whatever's gonna happen is out of my control, out of her control. Just relax and let it take its course.
The home was a rental, and it was the landlord who told Katie's insurance company about the leaking roof. Taking matters into his own hands, Katie's father, Jeff Freshley, interviewed the landlord himself.
He said that he had sent her there, but he had never seen her or talked to her, and he acted, they thought, in a suspicious manner.
But the landlord provided an alibi.
He had a worker with him through the majority of the day of the 12th when Katie was known to have gone missing.
It's our belief that the landlord probably did not tell the renters that Katie or anybody else would be coming that day.
In a search for suspects, investigators decided to check Katie's credit card records to see if anyone used them after her murder. Admittedly, it was a long shot, since few criminals are that inept.
Sure enough, they were. At least 4 attempts. And of the 4 attempts, I think 1 was actually successful. And that led to a whole new avenue of evidence for us.
Investigators went to every location where Katie's credit cards had been used. One was a grocery store, and its surveillance video showed a white male about 6 feet tall using Katie's debit card. According to the clerk, the customer said the card belonged to his girlfriend. But instead of signing Katie's name, he signed his own. It was Jason Funk, the man renting the home on Mulberry Street.
We were almost shocked at his stupidity. I can't even recollect what he was thinking or how he thought he could get away with something so obviously stupid.
In Jason's backyard, investigators found what looked like a fire pit. There they found burnt hunks of carpet and a burnt belt buckle.
It most certainly was consistent with the style and the size belt that Katie would have had on that particular day.
Investigators moved inside the house. They noticed what looked like a blood stain on the rear door frame. And on the living room ceiling, there was blood spatter.
And the realization that hit me as I was doing that was I really felt I was standing exactly in the spot where Katie Freshley had died in order for that blood to get up there.
Investigators also found a prepaid highway toll device with a serial number registered to Katie. And her business card was on a shelf above the oven.
And then you're claiming you've never met her before, you've never seen her before, and her business card is in your house? I mean, it's almost like leaving breadcrumbs. I mean, for heaven's sakes.
Finally, investigators took the medical examiner's advice and looked for an item in the home that could have been the murder weapon. And in the living room, they found it. A 4-foot-long motorcycle muffler.
It was sanitized to the point there were no discernible fingerprints and no attainable blood evidence.
On the end of the muffler was a circular mounting bracket.
You would use this mounting bracket to attach the muffler onto a motorcycle.
The mounting bracket was measured and then laid over photographs of Katie's fatal wounds. The round outer edge of the bracket was the exact size of the blunt force injuries on Katie's head.
The circular portion on the muffler was the exact same size as the injury on her scalp and gave a lot of credibility to that being the murder weapon.
And during the interrogation, detectives noticed something on Jason's Nike sneakers.
When detectives were actually interviewing Funk, they noticed what appeared to be blood droplets on his Nikes.
A presumptive test indicated this was human blood. Then investigators remembered the bank envelope found in Katie's car. So they sprayed it with the chemical ninhydrin, which revealed an almost perfect set of prints. Katie's fingerprints were on the envelope, and so were Jason Funk's.
That told us scientifically that Jason Funk had been in Katrina Freshley's vehicle.
Jason Funk continued to deny he was in any way involved. He claimed he was on a jet ski in the river at the time of the murder.
If I would have been home that day instead of out on my jet ski, who's to say I couldn't have prevented this whole thing from happening?
There's nothing, no part of my life that hasn't been touched by losing her. Nothing. Work, vacations, sports, fun, leisure time. It leaves a huge hole in your life. And Kate was such a bright, happy, hard-headed sweetheart. Just irreplaceable. They all are, but she was for me.
Prosecutors said they had conclusive proof that Jason Funk murdered Katie Freshley. As for motive, Jason had prior convictions for assaulting women. And 2 days before Katie's murder, Jason had lost his job.
They were having money problems. They had spent most of their savings on the security deposit for this residence, so I think he was motivated by greed. That's my belief.
Investigators know that Katie arrived at Funk's home because she told her co-worker on the phone that she found it. They believe it was Jason who approached her. When she went inside to inspect the roof damage, Jason was home alone. His girlfriend, Pam, was at work. Prosecutors think Jason might have made a sexual advance. No one knows. What the evidence shows is that he picked up the motorcycle muffler and struck Katie on the back of her head. This left a blood spatter on the ceiling and on his sneakers. As he exited the house with the body, Katie's blood stained the back door frame. The house was concealed enough that Jason could dump the body in the river without being seen. He abandoned Katie's car near a bar a mile away, handled the bank envelope looking for money, and took her cash and credit cards. He burned the blood-stained living room carpet and Katie's clothing in order to remove the evidence. He also cleaned the murder weapon, but he left so much other evidence, his efforts were hardly worth it. Using her credit card and signing his own name was a classic.
She was absolutely at the wrong place at the wrong time and fell victim to something that she should have never been victim of.
When you hear about cases like this, you want to think that, personally, I want to think the best of everyone, but it's difficult sometimes to do that when you see these things that have happened.
6 months after the murder, the forensic lab finished the DNA testing. The blood in Jason's home and on his sneakers was Katie Freshley's. The skin cells on the steering wheel of Katie's car were Jason's.
We put a piece of the puzzle together for the agency. We were able to match DNA from the victim to the crime scene. We were able to match DNA from the victim to the perpetrator's clothing.
Faced with a possible death sentence, Jason Funk agreed to plead guilty to the murder and in return was given a life sentence without parole.
I think it's a tragedy all the way around. It's a tragedy for him, it's a tragedy for our daughter, and a tragedy for us and his family.
Jason Funk still maintains he had nothing to do with the murder. He claims he only pled guilty to avoid the death sentence. The forensic evidence says otherwise.
The forensics in this case, it was key to bringing the murderer to justice. They all did just a tremendous job. We are forever grateful for the job that they did.
His denial of it was steadfast throughout the whole thing, and I don't believe without forensics, I'm not sure if we would have been able to convict him.